Atlas says in Ulysses, is a nightmare from which I am trying to awake. Surely many of us have felt this, that our personal history is too painful to look at, and that it is intolerable to identify ourselves too closely with the flawed, blind, and usually failed creatures of the world's history. If personal history and the world's history are a nightmare, Robert Lowell has opened his mind and art to that nightmare, and in the process has changed 20th century poetry. This openness to the world, to its detritus, humiliations, illuminations, is a moral act as well as an intellectual and emotional one. He writes in The Dolphin of, quote, preferring to have your body broken to being unbreakable in this breaking life, unquote. The result, paradoxically, is not nightmare. Lowell's style, with bravado and a kind of gaiety, simultaneously embodies and breaks the traditional poetic line. Nietzsche writes in a letter, my style is a dance, a play of symmetries of every kind, and an overleaping and mockery of these symmetries. Nietzsche adds, with his own bravado, this enters the very vowels. I want to end with one more quotation, which I think exemplifies these symmetries and joyful breaking of symmetries. In these lines, Lowell, looking back over his career, compares his work to a net that will last when the world it catches is gone, a net that will last as an emblem, perhaps indecipherable. Quote, my heart rises, I know I've gladdened a lifetime, knotting, undoing, a fishnet of tarred rope. The net will hang on the wall when the fish are eaten, nail like illegible bronze on the futureless future. Robert Lowell.
Poetry can't compete with prose. People have always tried to define the difference and have never succeeded. But I offer this definition that prose is usually intelligible when read aloud. Poetry usually isn't. However, those lines that my friend Frank Bidart just read are maybe an example of this. I've never understood what they meant, but they sounded good. They signify. Sanders Theatre's a famous trap for readers, and it has deaf spots, I think, and always has, and it's always being improved. And I read here years ago as a very young man, and got a certain amount of applause at the end, and it turned out to be very generous because an old gentleman came up to me and said, of course, you know, no one heard a word you said. Later, I discovered that Matthew Arnold read here in 1880. He couldn't be heard. He could be read. This is a poem called Mr. Edwards and the Spider. Mr. Edwards is Jonathan Edwards, the great 18th century New England preacher. And this draws from him. You know, your best poem might be putting Henry James into meter. This draws heavily on, but I changed it quite a lot, actually. When Edwards was a young man, he was interested in science and natural history, and he observed spiders flying in the air, and a rather lovely sight, sort of Coleridgean snakes floating in the sunlight. But he was already a Calvinist preacher, future Calvinist preacher, believing in predestination, and he said, well, you can see God's providence, that he's blowing them into the Atlantic Ocean where they'll perish, otherwise they'd overrun the earth. Later, when he preached his famous sermons, he had an image for the sinner. The sinner was someone heterodox from his point of view, and they'd be like a spider thrown into a furnace. I used both his spiders. He sounds like a fiend, but actually he was a very great man. I saw the spiders marching through the air, swimming from tree to tree that mildewed day in latter August when the hay came creaking to the barn. But where the wind is westerly, where gnarled November makes the spiders fly into the apparitions of the sky, they purpose nothing but their ease and die, urgently beating east to sunrise and the sea. This whole poem is spoken by Edwards, and it's like a sermon. What are we in the hands of the great God? It was in vain you set up thorn and briar in battle array against the fire and treason crackling in your blood. For the wild thorns grow tame and will do nothing to oppose the flame. Your lacerations tell the losing game. You play against a sickness past your cure. How will the hands be strong? How will the heart endure? A very little thing, a little worm, or hourglass blazoned spider, it is said can kill a tiger. Will the dead hold up his mirror and affirm to the four winds the smell and flash of his authority? It's well if God, who holds you to the pit of hell, much as one holds a spider, will destroy, baffle, and dissipate your soul. As a small boy on Windsor Marsh, I saw the spider die when thrown into the bowels of fierce fire. There's no long struggle, no desire to get up on its feet and fly. It stretches out its feet and dies. This is the sinner's last retreat. Yes, and no strength exerted on the heat, then sinews the abolished will, when sick and full of burning, it will whistle on a brick. But who can plumb the sinking of that soul? Brother, oh brother, picture yourself cast into a brick kiln where the blast fans your quick vitals to a coal. If measured by glass, how long would it seem burning? Let there pass a minute, 10 trillion, but the blaze is infinite, eternal. This is death, to die and know it. This is the Black Widow, death. Now from here on, my poems are much more comfort-giving. Did Auden say poems couldn't give comfort, or did he say they couldn't make anything happen? He said something of that sort. But they can give pleasure. They have to try to give pleasure. Bringing a turtle home, these two sonnets. Several years ago in Castine, Maine, I was driving with my daughter and we saw a sort of domed stone in the middle of the road. And after passing it, it seemed quite odd, and I walked back and it was a turtle. And we took it home. And we weren't up to it. It was too difficult to feed and keep. But the first poem is bringing the turtle home. The second poem is about taking the turtle back. Bangor is a city in Maine. It's not a city in India. On the road to Bangor, we spotted a domed stone, a painted turtle petrified by fear. I picked it up. The turtle had come a long walk, 200 millennia understudy to dinosaurs, then their survivors. A god for the out of power. Faster gods come to Castine, flush yachtsmen who see hell as a city very much like New York. These gods give a bad past and a worse future to men who never bother to set a spinnaker. Culture without cash isn't worth their spit. The laughter on Mount Olympus is always breezy. And I say to the turtle, "Good night, little boy, little soldier. Live a toy to your friend, a stone of stumbling to God. Sandpaper turtle scratching your pail for water." Returning turtle. My friend Christopher Ricks would say I was using the word returning in two senses, and I vaguely think I am. The turtle's returning, or I'm returning the turtle. I'm kidding. Returning turtle. Weeks hitting the road, one fasting in the bathtub. That's where we put the creature. Raw hamburger mossing in the watery stoppage. The room drenched with musk like kerosene. No one shaved, and only the turtle washed. He was so beautiful when we flipped him over. Greens, reds, yellows, fringe of the faded savage. The last Sioux, the Sioux Indian, old and worn, saying with weariness, "Why doesn't the great white father put his red children on wheels and move us as he will?" And they're all coming back now to Maine. We drove to the Orland River and watched the turtle rush for water like rushing into marriage, swimming in uncontaminated joy. Lovely the flies that fed that sleazy surface, a turtle looking back at us and blinking. This is, I suppose, the agony of history Mr. Bidart was talking about. Memories of West Street and Lepke. You probably don't know who Lepke is, but he was more famous once than any of us. He was Louis Lepke, and in the 30s, he headed an organization called Murder Incorporated. And you'd pay Murder Incorporated so much, and someone you didn't like would disappear. And, well, I suppose you can't go on with that forever. And he was sent to jail on trial for his life. And I, too, was sent to jail at that time as a conscientious objector. And for 10 days, we were inmates of the West Street Jail in New York. Well, Hannah Arendt has a famous phrase, the banality of evil. But a lot of evil isn't banal at all. But Lepke wasn't interesting in the least, and he looked like an acquaintance of mine who was a critic of abstract expressionism, only much less fierce. And he had various privileges in jail, and a year later he went to the electric chair. And the jail was sort of clearinghouse for people who were to go to other jails. And there was one conscientious objector who was the most extreme vegetarian I've ever met. He'd have a rope for a belt and rope shoes, and he nearly starved to death in the jail trying to avoid meat in his diet, and he had a sort of jaundiced color, and you'd say, but you look sort of jaundiced, and he'd say, no, it's tan. Well, he was put in a cell with two Hollywood labor leader pimps. They were serious, tough men, and he tried to convert them to vegetarianism, and they injured him. Now, this begins in a line that's out of date. Only teaching on Tuesdays. That's years ago. I teach Tuesdays and Wednesdays now. Memories of West Street and Lepke. Only teaching on Tuesdays, bookworming in pajamas fresh from the washer each morning. I hog the whole house on Boston's hardly passionate Marlborough Street, where even the man scavenging filth in the back alley trash cans has two children, a beach wagon, a helpmate, and is a young Republican. I have a 9-month daughter, young enough to be my granddaughter. Like the sun, she rises in her flame flamingo infant's wear. These are the tranquilized 50s, and I'm 40. Ought I to regret my seed time? I was a fire-breathing Catholic CO and made my manic statement telling off the state and president, and then sat waiting sentence in the bullpen beside a Negro boy with curlicues of marijuana in his hair. Given a year, I walked on the roof of the West Street Jail, a short enclosure like my school soccer court, and saw the Hudson River once a day through sooty clothesline entanglements and bleaching, khaki-colored tenements. Strolling, I yammered metaphysics with Abramowitz, a jaundiced yellow, it's really tan, and flyweight pacifist. So vegetarian, he wore rope shoes and preferred fallen fruit. He tried to convert Bioff and Brown, the Hollywood pimps, to his diet. Hairy, muscular, suburban, wearing chocolate double-breasted suits, they blew their tops and beat him black and blue. I was so out of things, I'd never heard of the Jehovah's Witnesses. "Are you a CO?" I asked a fellow jailbird. "No," he answered, "I'm a JW." He taught me the hospital tuck. That's the way to make your bed so you don't have to make it again for a week. He taught me the hospital tuck and pointed out the T-shirted back of Murder Incorporated Tsar Lepke, there piling towels on a rack, or dawdling off to his little segregated cell full of things forbidden the common man: a portable radio, a dresser, 2 toy American flags tied together with a ribbon of Easter palm. Flabby, bald, lobotomized, he drifted in a sheepish calm where no agonizing reappraisal jarred his concentration on the electric chair, hanging like an oasis in his air of lost connections. This is a longish, short poem. It's the beginning of my sequence, Life Studies. And it's memory of my grandfather and my uncle who died at 29 of Hodgkin's disease. And I was about, gosh, what was I? I mean, 6 or something, 5 or 6. His first experience of death. The poem's in 4 parts. And it's the nearest I think I've ever gotten to writing a story in verse. 1922, the stone porch of my grandfather's summer house. And the poem's called My Last Afternoon with Uncle Deveraux. "I won't go with you. I want to stay with Grandpa." That's how I threw cold water on my mother and father's watery martini pipe dreams at Sunday dinner. Fontainebleau, Mattapoisett, Puget Sound. Nowhere was anywhere after a summer at my grandfather's farm. Diamond Pointed, Athirst, and Norman, its alley of poplars paraded from grandmother's rose garden to a scary stand of virgin pine, scrub and paths forever pioneering. One afternoon in 1922, I sat on the stone porch looking through screens as black-grained as drifting coal. Talkie-talk, talkie-talk, thumped our Alpine Edwardian cuckoo clock, slung with strangled wooden game. Our farmer was cementing a root house under the hill. One of my hands was cool on a pile of black earth, the other warm on a pile of lime. All about me were the works of my grandfather's hands. Snapshots of his Liberty Bell silver mine, his high school at Stuttgart am Neckar, stogie brown beams, fool's gold nuggets, octagonal red tiles, sweaty with secret dank, crummy with ant stale. A rocky mountain chaise longue, its legs shellacked saplings. A pastel, pale, huckleberry fin, fished with a broom straw in a basin hollowed out of a millstone. Like my grandfather, the decor was manly, comfortable, overbearing, disproportioned. What were those sunflowers, pumpkins floating shoulder high? It was sunset, and Sadie and Nellie were bearing pitchers of iced tea, oranges, lemons, mint, and peppermints, and the jug of shandygaff which Grandpa made by blending half and half yeasty, wheezing, homemade sarsaparilla with beer. The farm, entitled Chardessay in the social register, was named for my grandfather's children, Charlotte, Deveraux, and Sarah. No one had died there in my lifetime. Only Cinder, our Scotty puppy, paralyzed from gobbling toads. I sat mixing black earth and lime. Second part. I was 5.5. My formal pearl gray shorts had been worn for 3 minutes. My perfection was the Olympian poise of my models in the imperishable autumn display windows of Rogers Pete's boys' store below the State House in Boston. Distorting drops of water pinpricked my face in the basin's mirror. I was a stuffed toucan with a bibulous, multicolored beak. Third part. I had a very beautiful great aunt, Aunt Sarah, and she had great talent with the piano, and she was very pretty, and she met the Abbé Liszt and made an impression on him and so forth. But she couldn't play at a concert. She'd get nervous and wouldn't appear. And up in the air, by the Lakeview window in the billiards room, lurid in the doldrums of the sunset hour, my great-aunt Sarah was learning Samson and Delilah. She thundered on the keyboard of her dummy piano, with gauze curtains like a boudoir table, accordion-like yet soundless. It had been bought to spare the nerves of my grandmother, tone-deaf, quick as a cricket, now needing a fourth for auction and casting a thirsty eye on Aunt Sarah, risen like the phoenix from her bed of troublesome snacks and Tauchnitz classics. 40 years earlier, 20, auburn-headed, grasshopper notes of genius. Family gossip says Aunt Sarah tilted her archaic Athenian nose and jilted an Astor. Astor's a rich man. Each morning she practiced on the grand piano at Symphony Hall, death-like in the off-season summer, its naked Greek statues draped with purple like the saints in Holy Week. On the recital day, she failed to appear. Now the last part. I picked with a clean finger at the blue anchor on my sailor blouse, washed white as a spinnaker. What in the world was I wishing? A sail-colored horse browsing in the bulrushes, a fluff of the west wind puffing my blouse, kiting me over our 7 chimneys, troubling the waters. As small as sapphires were the ponds, Quiticus, Snippatuit, and Assawampsit, halved by the island, where my uncle's duck blind floated in a barrage of smoke clouds. Double-barreled shotguns stuck out like bundles of baby crowbars. A single sculler in a camouflage kayak was quacking to the decoys. At the cabin between the waters, the nearest windows were already boarded. Uncle Deveraux was closing camp for the winter. As if posed for the engagement photograph, he was wearing his severe war uniform of a volunteer Canadian officer. Daylight from the doorway riddled his student posters, tacked helter-skelter on the wall, on walls as raw as a boardwalk. Mr. Punch, a watermelon in hockey tights, was tossing off a decanter of scotch. La Belle France, in a red, white, and blue toga, was accepting the arm of her protector, the ingenue and porcine Edward VII. The pre-war music hall bells had goosenecks, glorious signatures, beauty molds, and coils of hair like rooster tails. The finest poster was of 2 or 3 young men in khaki kilts being bushwhacked on the veldt. They were almost life-size. My uncle was dying at 29. "You're behaving like children," said my grandfather, when my uncle and aunt left their 3 baby daughters and sailed for Europe on a last honeymoon. I cowered in terror. I wasn't a child at all. Unseen and all-seeing, I was Agrippina in the golden house of Nero. Near me was the white measuring door my grandfather had penciled with my uncle's heights. In 1911, he had stopped growing at just 6 feet. While I sat on the tiles and dug at the anchor on my sailor blouse, Uncle Deveraux stood behind me. He was as brushed as Bidart, our riding horse. His face was putty. His blue coat and white trousers grew sharper and straighter. His coat was a blue jay's tail. His trousers were solid cream from the top of the bottle. He was animated, hierarchical, like a ginger snap man in a clothes press. He was dying of the incurable Hodgkin's disease. My hands were warm, then cool, on the piles of earth and lime, a black pile and a white pile. Come winter, Uncle Deveraux would blend to the one color. How am I doing for time? I didn't look at my watch when Have I gone 40 minutes or nowhere near? What? This is a poem called Central Park, and unlike the poem you just heard, it's rhymed, and I'd say Central Park is Central Park in New York. Its subjects are, I think, sex and terrorism and capitalism. It's a warm day like today, or maybe warmer. And one thing I better explain that sort of walking off the main path in Central Park, I came on a dead kitten, little kitten, and it was surrounded with all sorts of cat food that it couldn't possibly eat. It's welfare. Central Park. Scaling small rocks, exhaling smog, gasping at game scents like a dog, now light as pollen, now as white and winded as a grounded kite. I watched the lovers occupy every inch of earth and sky, one figure of geometry multiplied to infinity, straps down and sunning openly, each precious public pubic tangle an equilateral triangle, lost in the park, half covered by the shade of some low stone or tree. The stain of fear and poverty spread through each trapped anatomy and darkened every mote of dust. All wished to leave this drying crust, borne on the delicate wings of lust like bees, and cast their fertile drop into the overwhelming cup. Drugged and humbled by the smell of zoo straw mixed with animal, the lion prowled his slummy cell, serving his life term in jail, glaring, grinding on his heel with tingling step and testicle. Behind a dripping rock I found a one-day kitten on the ground, deprived, weak, ignorant, and blind, squeaking, tubular, left behind, dying with its deserters' rich welfare lying out of reach. Milk cartons, kidney heaped to spoil, 2 plates sheathed with silver foil. Shadows had stained the afternoon. High in an elm, a snagged balloon wooed the attraction of the moon. Scurrying from the mouth of night, a single fluttery paper kite grazed Cleopatra's needle, that's the obelisk there, and sailed where the light of the sun had failed. Then night, the jungle hour, the rich in his slit-windowed tower, old pharaohs starving in your foxholes, with painted banquets on the walls, fists knotted in your captives' hair, tyrants with little food to spare. All your embalming left you mortal, glazed, black, and hideously eternal. All your plunder and gold leaf only served to draw the thief. We beg delinquents for our life, behind each bush perhaps a knife, each landscaped crag, each flowering shrub hides a policeman with a club. I'll read 4 more poems, quite short, that, let's see, these are 2 sonnets about the Pentagon March, anti-Vietnam War demonstration. I've been praised by being rather casual and unheroic about this, and I've also been criticized for being rather casual and unheroic about it. Anyway, I wasn't very heroic. And you get in one of these marches, if probably a good many of you have, and maybe you don't want to get into it particularly, but you get rather carried away by the whole thing. And if they're police, you get in a mood of enthusiasm and terror. And we didn't capture the Pentagon. The March, 1. Under the 2 white marmoreal Lincoln Memorial, the 2 tall marmoreal Washington obelisk, gazing into the 2 long reflecting pool, the reddish trees, the withering autumn sky, the remorseless amplified harangues for peace. Lovely to lock arms, to march absurdly locked, unlocking to keep my wet glasses from slipping, to see the cigarette match quaking in my fingers, then to step off like green Union Army recruits for the first bull run, sped by photographers, the notables, the girls, fear, glory, chaos, rout. Our green army staggered out on the miles-long green fields, met by the other army, the Martian, the ape, the hero, his newfangled rifle, his green new steel helmet. At the end, I don't know, everyone over 40, it was a rather small percentage of the march, seemed to get in one place, and Dr. Spock was there, and we weren't beaten up, but the police did walk over us. Where 2 or 3 were flung together, or 50, mostly white-haired, or bald, or women, sadly unfit to follow their dream, I sat in the sunset shade of our Bastille, the Pentagon, nursing leg and arch cramps, my cowardly, foolhardy heart, and heard, alas, more speeches. Though the words took heart now to show how weak we were and right. An MP sergeant kept repeating, "March slowly through them, don't even brush anyone sitting down." They tiptoed through us in single file, and then their second wave trampled us flat and back. Health to those who held, health to the green steel head, to your kind hands that helped me stagger to my feet and flee. The kind hands of Dwight McDonald's. This is a poem to my friend John Berryman, the poet, and it came from reading his book that came out this fall, which has a poem where he plans his suicide, and then he did it. And the poem is very, it's a mixture of humor and pathos, the poem. Humor and tragedy. For John Berryman, after reading his last dream song. The last years, we only met when you were on the road and lit up for reading your battering dream. Audible, deaf, in another world then as now. I used to want to live to avoid your elegy. Yet really, we had the same life, the generic one our generation offered, les maudits, the compliment each American generation pays itself in passing. First students, then with students of our own, our galaxy of grand maîtres, our 50s, 1950, our 50s fellowships to Paris, Rome, and Florence, veterans of the Cold War, not the war, all the best of life. Then, daydreaming to drink at 6, waiting for the iced fire, even the feel of the frosted glass, like waiting for a girl, if you had ever waited. We asked to be obsessed with writing, and we were. Something so heavy lies on my heart. There, still here, the good days when we sat by a cold lake in Maine, talking about the winter's tale, Leontes' jealousy in Shakespeare's broken syntax. You got there first. Just the other day, I discovered how we differ. Humor. Even in this last dream song, to mock your cat-like flight from home and classes, to leap from the bridge. Girls will not frighten the frost of the grave. To my surprise, John, I pray too, not for you, think of you, not myself, smile and fall asleep. Do you wake dazed like me up there and find your lost glasses in a shoe? My age and before 60, before I reached 60, most of my friends seem to have had heart attacks or some quite serious disease or commit suicide, but the ones who have heart attacks recover. But this is my oldest friend, really, Frank Parker, who draws pictures for my books, and was mugged and quite sick 2 years ago. Now it's not, but it's a sort of school days reminiscing poem. To Frank Parker. 40 years ago, we were here where we are now. The same erotic May wind blew the trees from there to here. The same tang of metal in the mouth, the dirt-pierced wood of Cambridge. Sometimes you are so much younger than your face, I know I am seeing your old face, the hampered Henry James mockery of your stutter, your daily fear of choking, dying. In school, loudness, not words, gave character to the popular boy's voice. We looked in the face of the other for what we were. Once, in the common record heat of June in Massachusetts, we sat by the school pool, talking out the soul-lit night, and listened to the annual, unsuffering voice of the tree frogs, green, aimless, and wakened. I want to write. I want to paint. Was it I wanted you to paint? Age is another species, the nothing-voiced. The very old made grandfather look vulgarly young when he drove me to feed them at their home. We will have their thoughtful look, as if uncertain who had led our lives. Wherever there's grass, there's pollen, the asthma of high summer, the inclination to drink, not eat. Let us go into the garden, or should I say the yard? He says that. Why have you said this twice, Frank? The garden has no flowers, no choice of color. The thick red clump of grass thins to red clay, like an Indian's shaved and tufted head, or yours. We once claimed alliance with the redskin. What is won by surviving if 2 glasses of red wine are poison? Thank you.